Please, just for a moment, close your eyes. Try to remember a specific sound from your childhood. Perhaps it is the rhythmic metallic clicking of a dynamo against a bicycle tire in the warm evening dusk. Or maybe it is a smell, the deeply comforting sharp scent of freshly ground coffee wafting through the open door of a small local grocery store. Welcome back to the 1960s, 70s and 80s in Hungary. Today we are going to embark on a beautiful journey together. We will explore 20 strange, wonderful and entirely forgotten habits from our youth that today's world has left far behind. We will walk through memories of a time when objects had weight, when moments required patience, and when the simplest things brought the greatest joy. Stay with me until the very end, because our final memory, a beautifully slow ritual involving a simple piece of cardboard and a postage stamp, will gently remind you of what it truly means to care for someone. Before we open the door to our past, let us pause and remember how time used to feel. Back then, time flowed at a completely different pace. It was slower, gentler, and free from the endless rush that consumes our days now. There is a strange modern myth that because we lacked advanced technology, smartphones, and the internet, our lives must have been emotionally poorer or somewhat empty. The absolute truth is the exact opposite. Because we had to wait for things, we learned the immense value of anticipation. Because we could not just send a quick digital message, our human connections were deeper, more deliberate, and incredibly sincere. We gathered in living rooms, we talked over fences, and we truly looked into each other's eyes. Life in those decades was rich with tactile sensations, vibrant smells, and shared rituals that united us all. It was an era where true wealth was not measured by what we owned, but by the warmth of our communities and the pure sincerity of our daily interactions. And now, let us remember the beautiful, enforced silence of Monday evenings. If you lived in Hungary during the 1960s and 1970s, you remember that television broadcasting simply did not exist on Mondays. It was a day of national television silence, a designated pause in the week. Instead of staring at a glowing screen, families were genuinely forced to look at each other. You would hear the familiar, soft shuffling of French cards as a game of rummy or alti began on the kitchen table. The radio might be playing softly in the background, crackling with evening jazz or a quiet theatrical play. Children would actually read books, turning the slightly yellowed, rough pages under the warm light of a single floor lamp. The silence of the apartment was not empty. It was filled with the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, the clinking of teacups, and the gentle murmur of genuine conversation. It was a time when parents asked about your day, and they actually had the quiet space to listen to your entire answer. Today, we have hundreds of channels broadcasting 24 hours a day, but we often feel more isolated than we did in those quiet, screenless Monday evenings when our living rooms were filled with the warmth of real, uninterrupted human connection. Let us turn our memories to the heavy public telephone booths and the legendary coin we called the tantush. Finding a working red or yellow phone booth on the street was an adventure in itself. Do you remember the distinct smell inside those booths? A mixture of old tobacco smoke, damp paper directories, and metallic dust. You would stand in line, holding that heavy, distinctly grooved coin in your palm, feeling its reassuring weight. You could hear muffled snippets of other people's lives through the glass door. When it was your turn, you dialed the heavy rotary wheel, waiting for the physical clicks of the mechanism. Then came the most crucial moment, the loud, ringing clink as the tantush dropped into the machine, signaling that your connection was made. Because you only had a few minutes before you needed another coin, every single word mattered. We did not waste breath on trivialities. We called to say we arrived safely, to confess love, or to share vital news. That simple metallic sound of the dropping coin was the soundtrack of connecting our distant lives. Now breathe in deeply and recall the magnificent scent of the local grocery store. Long before massive supermarkets existed, we had the beloved local shops. But the most memorable part was always located right near the exit. It was the large, imposing, industrial red coffee grinder. Buying coffee beans was a sensory ritual. You would purchase your paper bag of roasted beans, walk over to the machine, and pour them into the shiny metal funnel at the top. When you pressed the heavy black button, the machine roared to life with a deep, vibrating hum. You had to hold your paper bag tightly under the spout as the warm, freshly ground coffee poured down. The vibration would travel up your arms, and the intensely rich, bitter, intoxicating aroma of the coffee would instantly fill the entire store. It was a smell that promised quiet Sunday mornings and warm adult conversations in the kitchen. Carrying that intensely fragrant paper bag all the way home was a joy in itself, a simple luxury that filled the streets with the scent of roasted comfort. Let us quench our thirst with the unforgettable, sticky sweetness of the legendary orange soda in the thick glass bottles. Long before global brands took over, we had our own unique refreshments. Do you remember the heavy ribbed glass bottle that seemed virtually indestructible? The metal crown cap required a proper opener, and taking it off produced a satisfying hiss. The drink inside had a vibrant, almost unnatural amber color. Its taste was entirely unique, intensely sweet with a slightly fermented, almost bitter orange peel aftertaste that modern drinks simply cannot replicate. On a blazing hot summer afternoon, sitting at a small metal table covered with a red and white checkered tablecloth, drinking this soda was pure magic. The condensation would drip down the thick glass, leaving sticky, sweet rings on the table that attracted eager wasps. We would savor every single sip, tilting our heads back to get the very last drop, leaving us with sticky fingers and incredibly happy hearts. We must also pay tribute to the ultimate uniform of our beloved grandmothers, the colorful nylon housecoat. This vibrant, sleeveless garment was an absolute staple in every Hungarian household during the 1970s and 1980s. Do you remember the incredibly specific rustling sound it made as your grandmother hurried across the kitchen floor? The material was purely synthetic, often generating little sparks of static electricity in the dry winter air. But the true magic of this garment lay in its two massive, deep front pockets. Those pockets were an absolute treasure trove. From them, a grandmother could produce a clean, neatly folded cloth handkerchief, a small wooden comb, or, most importantly for us children, a piece of hard candy wrapped in crinkly paper. The housecoat always carried the faint, comforting smells of the house, a mixture of fried onions, sweet paprika, and lavender soap. It was not a fashion statement. It was a garment of pure love, worn by the women who tirelessly kept the heart of the family beating. Think back to the rhythmic soundtrack of a Saturday morning in the courtyard of any apartment building. I am talking about the heavy iron frames standing in the middle of the yard, specifically designed for beating carpets. Waking up on a weekend often meant hearing the loud, echoing thwack-thwack sound bouncing off the brick walls. Someone's father or older brother would be out there, vigorously swinging a woven rattan carpet beater. You could see the thick clouds of dust catching the pale morning sunlight, slowly drifting away. It was a highly physical, exhausting chore, but it was also a deeply communal event. While the carpets were being beaten, neighbors would lean over their open balconies, shaking out their dusters and sharing the latest neighborhood gossip. The rhythmic slapping sound was a reassuring sign of order, a ritual of cleansing that swept away the dirt of the week, leaving the home smelling of fresh air and hard work. Let us travel in our minds to the shores of the Great Lake during a hot summer, carrying the iconic little leather-bound transistor radio. This small, heavy brick of a device was our absolute window to the entire world. Do you remember the stiff tan leather casing and the silver telescopic antenna that you had to carefully extend and angle just right? Turning the small plastic dial was an art form. You had to navigate through a sea of hissing static and strange whistling frequencies to find the clear broadcast of the midday news, or, more secretly in the evenings, the forbidden music broadcasts from foreign stations. Sitting on a blanket on the grass, the smell of garlic fried dough and heavy sunscreen mixing in the air, the crackling, slightly distorted sound of the speaker provided the ultimate summer soundtrack. It was a magical little box that brought the voices of distant cities straight into our quiet, sun-drenched afternoons by the water. We cannot speak of our youth without honoring the most important evening ritual for every single child in the country. Just before 8 o'clock in the evening, no matter what we were doing, we rushed to the television screen. We waited for the familiar, comforting xylophone melody to begin. And there he was, the beloved little television bear. We watched him diligently wash his face, brush his teeth, and gargle with that distinct, funny sound. He was our ultimate role model for bedtime hygiene. When he finally sat down with his little companion to watch a short cartoon, we felt incredibly safe. But more than just a broadcast, this was a profoundly unifying national moment. At that exact minute, every single child in the entire country was doing the exact same thing. It was a synchronized collective bedtime that united millions of families in a shared moment of innocent peace, signaling that the day's worries were over and it was time to rest. Do you recall the profound lesson in patience taught to us by the little colorful saving stamps we collected in school? Every week we would bring a few small coins to our homeroom teacher to purchase these tiny slips of paper. You had to lick the back, tasting that distinctive, slightly sweet and bitter glue, and press it firmly into the designated square of your collection booklet. Watching those pages slowly fill up over the months was a source of immense pride. We were saving up for a summer camp, a new football, or a special book. In today's world of instant credit and immediate digital purchases, the concept seems almost alien. But that little booklet taught us the true value of money and the deep satisfaction of delayed gratification. Holding that completed book at the end of the school year felt like holding pure gold, a tangible representation of our dedication, patience, and unwavering discipline. Let us recall the aggressive, magnificent hiss of the heavy metal soda siphon. In the intense heat of a July afternoon, this device was the absolute centerpiece of the kitchen table. Do you remember the weight of the thick aluminum bottle, cool to the touch? The true ritual began when you screwed the small silver gas cartridge into the side. You had to twist it quickly and firmly, Suddenly there was a loud, violent rushing sound as the carbon dioxide forcefully injected itself into the cold water. The bottle would shudder slightly in your hands. Then came the reward. Pressing the heavy metal lever, the incredibly sharp, fiercely bubbling water would splash into a glass, often mixing with chilled white wine to create the perfect, refreshing summer spritzer. The bubbles were so strong, they would prickle your nose. It was not just a drink, it was an event, a loud, joyful, mechanical process that instantly relieved the oppressive heat of the summer sun. Moving on to a ritual known only to those who truly cherished their music. Imagine holding a plastic audio cassette tape and a simple hexagonal yellow pencil. Because the batteries for our portable tape recorders were terribly expensive and drained incredibly fast, we learned a brilliant trick. When we wanted to rewind our favorite rock album, we would not waste the precious battery power. Instead, we took the cassette out, wedged the yellow pencil perfectly into the plastic sprocket, and began to spin it by hand. It was a mindful, repetitive, almost meditative motion. You could feel the slight tension of the magnetic tape tightening as you twirled the plastic casing around the pencil. We became incredibly skilled at guessing exactly how many spins it would take to land exactly at the beginning of our favorite song. It was a deeply tactile, physical relationship with our music, making the eventual listening experience feel completely earned and infinitely more precious. I want you to remember the immense physical undertaking that was wash day. Before automatic machines quietly did the work in the background, washing clothes was a massive, loud, and steamy event. The bathroom would be transformed into a thick, humid sauna. The centerpiece was the large, white, cylindrical washing machine, vibrating violently on the tiled floor. The noise was deafening, a deep, rhythmic rumbling that shook the entire apartment. Do you remember the sharp, distinct, almost chemical smell of the industrial washing powder foaming in the scalding hot water? The most vivid memory is using those long, heavy wooden tongs to carefully fish out the boiling hot, heavy wet bedsheets from the steaming water, transferring them to the separate spin dryer. Wash day was exhausting, back-breaking physical labor, usually done by our incredible mothers. When those stiff, sun-dried sheets finally made it to our beds, they smelled of pure, hard-fought cleanliness and immense, unconditional love. Let us walk together in the crisp spring air of a May Day parade. Waking up early on the 1st of May was an explosion of colour and community. The streets were completely closed to traffic and filled with thousands of people. You carried small paper flags on thin wooden sticks, and the air was filled with the sound of brass bands and cheerful chatter. But the most unforgettable part was the smell. Wafting through the cool morning air was the overwhelmingly delicious scent of freshly boiled frankfurters and strong, sweet mustard. You would stand in line to get a simple paper plate holding a pair of hot, snapping sausages and a thick slice of fresh, rustic white bread. Eating that simple meal while standing on the pavement, surrounded by neighbours, friends, and colourful crepe paper decorations, felt like a grand feast. It was a day where the entire city became a single, joyful dining room, united by the simple pleasure of walking together in the spring sunshine. We must also remember the brutally cold, pitch-black winter mornings of the traditional rural pig slaughter. This was not just an agricultural chore, it was an ancient, highly organized family gathering. Waking up at 4 a.m, the freezing air would bite your cheeks. The first ritual was always the passing of a small glass of incredibly strong homemade plum brandy to warm the blood and focus the mind. The smells of that day are unforgettable. the sharp, slightly acrid smoke of the straw fire used to singe the bristles, mixing later with the incredibly comforting, rich aroma of massive cauldrons boiling onions, garlic, and heavy meats. Every single family member, from the oldest grandfather to the youngest child, had a specific, vital task. Working together in the freezing mud, our hands numb but our hearts warm, we preserved the food that would sustain the family through the bitter winter. It was the ultimate expression of human survival, deeply rooted tradition, and unbreakable family unity. Think back to the weekends spent on the sidewalk, admiring the pride of the family, the small pale blue or grey two-stroke car. Washing this vehicle was a public weekend ritual performed right on the street. You could hear the car coming from a mile away with its completely unique puttering, popping engine sound. The smell of its exhaust, a distinct mixture of cheap petrol and heavy lubricating oil, would linger in the warm afternoon air. Fathers would bring out a plastic bucket of warm, soapy water and a large yellow sponge. They would meticulously wash every curve of the fiberglass body, polishing the thin chrome bumpers until they shined. Neighbors walking their dogs would stop to admire the work, offering advice or just chatting about the weather. Owning that small, incredibly noisy car was a massive privilege, and maintaining it with your own hands was a profound point of pride, turning a simple chore into a joyful weekend social event. Let us take a trip to the Buddha Hills or the deep forests on a classic school excursion. Your canvas backpack was heavy, but the true treasure was waiting inside for lunch. It was the legendary, simple sandwich made with thick slices of rustic bread and a generous spread of tinned liver paste. Do you remember the small, round aluminum tin, peeling back the thick foil lid to reveal the smooth, savory paste inside? Our mothers would wrap these slightly messy sandwiches in those thin, crinkly paper napkins that never truly held anything together. By the time you reached the peak of the hill, exhausted and sweating, the sandwich was usually slightly squashed and lukewarm. But sitting on a fallen log, surrounded by your loudly chatting classmates, breathing in the fresh pine air, that simple, humble liver paste sandwich tasted better than any gourmet meal in the world. It was the undeniable taste of youthful adventure, boundless energy, and the freedom of the open forest. Let us turn our minds to the classroom and the incredibly slow, deliberate art of writing. Before the era of cheap ballpoint pens and keyboards, we learned to write using fountain pens. This was a messy, beautiful, and highly demanding process. Do you remember the dark blue ink stains permanently marking the sides of your fingers? You had to hold the pen at exactly the right angle, listening to the soft, scratchy sound of the metal nib gliding across the slightly rough, checkered paper of your notebook. We also used special, highly absorbent blotting paper. After writing a beautiful sentence, you had to gently press the soft blotting paper over the wet ink to prevent it from smudging. It forced us to slow down. We could not rush our thoughts. Every single letter required physical effort, precision, and deep concentration. The physical act of writing taught us that our words had weight, permanence, and required profound respect. Do you remember the absolute freedom of riding a heavy, folding bicycle through the cooling evening streets? These iconic small-wheeled bicycles were heavy, incredibly sturdy, and could fold in half to fit into the trunk of a small car. But the most distinct memory is riding them after the sun went down. To have light, you had to physically push a small, ribbed metal dynamo against the rubber of your front tire. As soon as you started pedaling, the resistance was incredibly heavy. The friction created a loud, high-pitched mechanical whining sound that echoed through the quiet suburban streets. The faster you pedaled, the higher the pitch of the whine, and the brighter the dim yellow cone of light became on the dark pavement ahead of you. If you stopped at an intersection, the light died completely. It was a perfect mechanical relationship. You literally had to sweat to create your own light, powering your way home through the warm, incredibly peaceful summer night. We must revisit the memories of the classic, subsidized family summer holidays by the lake. For 2 magical weeks, families would travel to massive state or trade union-run resort complexes. These places were entirely unique. You slept in small, identical wooden cabins or massive, slightly grey concrete hotel blocks. But the atmosphere was absolutely electric with joy. The most vivid memory is waking up and walking to the enormous communal dining hall. The air inside was thick with the incredibly comforting smell of warm, milky coffee served from massive aluminium pitchers, alongside baskets piled high with fresh, crusty bread and small foil packets of butter. You spent your days swimming in the warm, shallow lake, and your evenings playing endless rounds of ping-pong under the buzzing yellow light of a street lamp. We did not have luxury suites or private pools, but we had hundreds of other children to play with, building temporary but intensely deep friendships during those long, golden, deeply cherished summer days. Finally, let us remember the most beautiful, deliberate, and deeply emotional ritual of all: the handwritten holiday postcard. Whenever we traveled anywhere, finding the local post office was a primary task. You would stand in front of a spinning metal rack, carefully selecting a slightly glossy photograph of the lake, the sunset, or the town square. Then, sitting at a quiet cafe or on a bench, you would take out your pen. Because space was incredibly limited, you had to think very carefully about your words. You licked the back of the small perforated stamp, tasting the dry adhesive, and pressed it firmly into the corner. You wrote to your grandparents, your neighbors, or your best friend, simply to say, "We are here, it is beautiful, and we are thinking of you." The magic of the postcard was its profound delay. You knew with absolute certainty that by the time this piece of cardboard arrived in their mailbox, you would probably already be back home. But that did not matter at all. The postcard was not about instant information. It was a tangible, physical piece of your journey, touched by your hands, carrying your personal handwriting, proving that even while you were far away, your loved ones were firmly held in your heart. As we open our eyes and return to the fast-paced reality of today, we realize a profound truth. We do not just miss the heavy glass bottles, the dropping coins, or the old radios. What we truly, desperately miss is the feeling of time itself. We miss our youth. We miss the slow, deliberate pace of a world where waiting was a virtue, where objects were built to last, and where human connection required physical presence, not just a digital signal. We miss the sincerity of looking into someone's eyes without the distraction of a glowing screen. These 20 memories are not just forgotten habits. They are the beautiful, enduring foundation of who we are today. If this journey back in time brought a smile to your face or a tear to your eye, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video so we can continue preserving these beautiful stories. And now I want to ask you a question. Which of these 20 memories touched your heart the most? Or what is a ritual from your own youth that the world has forgotten? Please write your story in the comments below. Let us read each other's memories and keep the beautiful spirit of our past alive together.